this past week, of course, we had the big Neuralink presentation, and then the Tesla Semi delivery presentation. Just general impressions of that. So I think for me the Neuralink, the fact that they're getting to 1,000 channels, having the chips made, having the surgical device, they seem to be at the gotten to their minimal viable product kind of thing, and that just have to go through roughly 6 months of FDA approvals on that to get to doing this medical applications work that they were saying with the beginning of what they're doing. So it's interesting, and then they have the path to get to 16,000 channels, to continue to improve that, and then they have the separate thing for the threads. So it was, I think, an interesting device that they're doing, but still is, I think, quite a ways from medical type remediation type things, which is, which you said was the first thing they're going to do. Any other comments for Lars or Randy in terms of the Neuralink one? I think that for me, the bigger thing, of course, is the Semi. I think that a lot of the stuff, we see Brad Ferguson's here, so I'll also make him speaker. So I think for me, that's the bigger thing, that a lot of stuff that people looking at are just looking at the truck itself and not getting the bigger picture of what's going to happen with that. But that'll be the meat, I think, of my discussion later. But any just in general, things about they want to talk about for that, or I can start laying into my Tesla Semi spiel for Randy or Lars or anyone else.
Yeah, and let's remind them, Brian, that there is an hour-and-a-half video that you and I did the other day. Digs in great depth, because there is way more revenue and way more profit. And that, I think, folks aren't understanding that the profit stream is greater, but there's also a cost in terms of I'll leave it.
Okay, so yeah, so as Randy was saying, we talked about for an hour. So one of the things is that for me, the one of the big light bulb moments was when they discussed the megawatt, or even 2 megawatt charging of the system, because basically that's about 250 or 300 times more faster charging than people with a Tesla home charger can do. A Tesla home charger takes about 8 hours to charge a 60 kilowatt hour Model Y or something like that, and this thing can charge nearly a megawatt hour. But based on the later tweets from Elon, 1.7 kilowatt hours per mile. Then we're looking at 850 kilowatt hours for the 500-mile system, and 510 kilowatt hours for the 300-mile system. But because of that, then I think they must have these megapacks, maybe many of these megapacks at scale to buffer the grid. That sucking at that fast pace would strain the power supplies too much, like the plants and the transformers and everything about the grid too much to and if you could do that, you could reduce that strain by 10 times, 20 times by having things trickle in at a slightly slower pace, but still fast pace into your megapack, and then have that supply the power to the system. The 15 trucks that Pepsi has probably have 1 or 2 megapacks at a Pepsi bottling plant charging station, and then they would have the 500-mile thing would go out up to 250 miles, make it run, come back, and then recharge, and then you wouldn't have it anywhere else. But each megapack costs about $2 million, 2.4, I think, if you just buy 1 or 2, and then can drop down, I think, below $2 million if you're having it at the level. So basically, it's like 15 trucks selling for $3 million, say if it's $200,000 each, and then 2 megapacks selling for $4 million, right? And then the other charging components of that. So semi-truck, I think, is the tip of the spear that will make the Tesla Energy scale a lot more. There is Tesla Energy sales to PG&E, 6 gigawatt hours or something like that possible, based on them doing fixed storage, and then you have 20 times that from the other US-based utilities and that kind of thing. But they won't scale that fast. But the Tesla's need, if they go to like 40,000 trucks in 2024, that is, I have some of that worked out in my spreadsheet here. And then, we're looking at about 25 gigawatt hours of batteries inside the semis. And then I'm thinking that half of that or even more would be in the gigawatt hours of the megapacks needed to service those semis, because of the need to get that out in the network. Looking at trying to break down the miles and the, how many total charging gigawatts would be needed. That if they have 30,000 trucks, then the charging would be happening all the time, because they'd be looking at 4.6 billion miles, or nothing. About, if it's 40,000, it would be 5.8 billion miles driven if you're looking at 100,000, 120,000 miles per vehicle. And that's about 10 gigawatt hours of total charging needed. So that basically these things scale up massively. And something that I talked about with Randy is that because of the economic forcing of this thing, where instead of spending $80,000 to $100,000 on diesel, and possibly more in the European and other countries where diesel may be more expensive, then you're only spending $15,000 to $20,000 for the electricity. That $80,000 savings, you get the cost of your vehicle back in 2 years, and then even the cost of the megapacks, kind of like bringing forward the reducing the costs of your electricity. That is more powerful than saving $3,000, $4,000 per year on a Model Y or Model 3 versus a Mercedes C-Class or something like that. Because the fuel savings take 10 to 15 years to pay back, or 10 to 12 years to pay back on the passenger car side, but it takes 3 years or something or less to pay back on the semi-truck end. So it's a step change in terms of like how much more desirable it would be. And because you're saving all this money on the fuel, that there could be this massive rush to, once it's proved out, Pepsi proves out, okay, these 15 trucks are working great. Pepsi has by itself over 40,000 trucks. Then they would say, I got to get all of them on there. And then Coca-Cola, everyone else will say, well, crap, they cut out 7%, 8% of their overall costs to deliver their products. I can't fall behind. So even though there's only 270,000 trucks sold in the United States per year, 300,000 some in Europe, 1 million to 2 million in China, that the overall world fleet of 20 million trucks, they could push and accelerate to 1 million, 2 million, even beyond that, 3 million vehicles to do it. If they scale up to 1 million by 2032, it would still take to 2049 to 2049, another 16 years, something like that, to get to 20 million vehicles, because you get to 4.4 million vehicles by 2023, and then you'd still need another 16 years to get to 20 million vehicles, which would be 2049. If you were to go to 2 million by 2032, then you're 20 million, you get 9 million total vehicles, total semis by 2023, and then you get to 20 million by 2039. So this getting to semis at scale, the urgent need to do it. If I get to 4 million, it'd be, I get to 20 million in 2033. but then you have this massive build out. It's a question of like, that there is expansion beyond the current fleet of 20 million vehicles. One, there could be another 5 million to replace a lot of rail. If I pull rail onto that, which would be a bigger thing, I think, in Europe, which may use more rail for cargo deliveries. And another, so that's a thing we can dive into a lot more as to what that economic impact would be, why countries would be hot to trot to support it. China could, if they convert their 10 million large trucks to electric, they save 3 million barrels per day of oil, which basically doubles their current, production of 3.5 million barrels, and reduces their dependence on overseas oil from 10 million down to 7 million. So nationally, strategically, you wouldn't want to start a war if you can, reduce that oil demand. And then the other, so I think this thing could scale up to, 1 to 3 terawatt hours of batteries by 2030-ish for megapacks and semis, depending on how this scales. And there's also the Inflation Reduction Act impact of that. And then so then that would be a major anchor to spread out the megapacks for all kinds of energy for Tesla to get up to, the end goal of 300 terawatts to convert everything. So the end goal, I see EVs, that if it's 2 billion vehicles, that's 80 terawatt hours. And then 20 million semis would be about 14 gigawatt hours of batteries. And then megapacks might be at like 8 terawatt hours. So if this is accelerated because of this massive economic incentive to do that, then that would accelerate. And then the other thing that they said, which was really notable to me, was when he talked about the 1,000-volt powertrain system for the semi-truck, that they say for other vehicles, which clearly would mean, some kind of premium Cybertruck, and anything like in between Cybertruck and semi could have these 1,000-volt things where you need it. Tangentially, it also would mean that you would have 1,000-volt systems for Boring Company tunneling machines, any other industrial equipment. So basically, it just means all industrial machinery fall within the scope of doable engineering. You can't say, okay, it wouldn't have enough power, it wouldn't have enough torque. Tesla basically answered that with this working semi. A third number that jumped out to me, that's another topic that needs to be explored more. Go ahead.
Why don't you let Bradford jump in?
Okay, Bradford, yeah, let me just, how do I,
No, you're fine.
Okay.
So I encourage people to follow Randy. I didn't know about Randy until I watched the video. Maybe I'm slow. So Randy's done a lot of writing on Tesla, which is cool. One pushback I have, Brian,
yep.
and I do want to keep our thinking in general kind of expansive, more like a brainstorm, and I don't want to be like shooting you down too much, but
sure.
In your video, you were thinking that 1 megapack per how many Tesla semis?
10 or 20, I was thinking.
Okay, because that substantially increases the upfront capital cost.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be harder for people like Pepsi to buy the Megapack. So maybe Tesla does something with leasing or something. Mm-hmm. I think if it's just 10 per Megapack, I think the Megapacks go for what, 3 million?
Yeah, I think 2.4, sometimes 3, depends on where you are. Yeah.
Okay. And if you order, the more you buy, the more you save. That's a Jensen quote from NVIDIA.
Yeah.
So if you get that down to 20 trucks per Megapack, then maybe that adds 120,000 per Tesla semi in a way to the upfront cost. That might be doable, but it may affect what Tesla's able to sell the semi for. And you also have cost per charger. I think that the cost on a normal charger is around like 60 to 80,000. That's kind of what I've heard. That may be wrong. So I'm guessing with the mega charger with the liquid cooling, they may start at 100,000 at it once they get to scale. So I guess like that would be one of the concerns is what's the total upfront cost look like? Obviously the fuel savings are huge. You don't have to replace the brakes as much. The safety, the performance are enormous. The environmental savings and the effect on people's health would be huge. But I don't think businesses are going to pay for the negative externalities like the particulate matter.
Right.
But like I really enjoyed the video, and just want to give you a chance to respond.
Sure. So I agree that there's extra cost, and many companies may not want to pay for it. I think though there's reasons, particularly in the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act, where they would want to pay for it, because my reading in the Inflation Reduction Act is that installing fixed storage will give them up to 50% tax incentive. There's some where it gets to 70%, but it involves doing something for the fixing poverty or some low wage workers, something like that. There's some complexity around that, but the 50% was based upon what was it? Based upon U.S. developed parts and components and that kind of stuff, which is something that Tesla can handle. So the actual cost, even though it's like, say, 2 megapacks at $4 million, you get $2 million written off. The question how that's written off, and maybe you can look at that as to exactly how it's written off. It seems to be invested in tax credits. So it's not, so I think it goes where I can say, instead of me making $10 million and having that taxed and paying $3.5 million of tax on that, or $4 million of tax on that, I have, I write off $2 million against that and go down to $8 million and then pay, 40% less of that. So the $800,000, something less of the $2 million. So
a tax credit is better than a deduction. So it's,
right.
It just goes right off the top of taxes paid. So that's a great point. It's hard to keep all these different facets in our minds. And
well, here Bradford, here's
Randy.
Big one. Here's a big one, Bradford. When you buy a diesel truck and you start paying X number, let's call it $80,000 a year for gasoline, that $80,000 of gasoline is just a cost. It just goes out. When you now are only paying $20,000 for electrification, for electric energy, there's a $60,000 savings. And at least in the early days, when you're in competition and that $60,000 is still being paid by your competitor, that $60,000 basically drops to the bottom line and or pays off the truck in short order and or would easily pay for some amount of energy storage and also solar paneling on the roof or in parking lots. So there is a sunk cost, but the return, if you put the solar in and also the battery and then have a managed system where it's using the grid in and out, the potential for this dropping the $20,000 expense down to $10,000 a year, so maybe saving another $10,000. So you might end up with $70,000 a year to go to the bottom line or pay off the truck.
So one thing that I was thinking about, in your point, Bradford, is that they're basically like you're prepaying for your fuel. So yes, the truck costs $200,000, $250,000 if they raise the price or something like that, $40,000 off because of the tax credit, and then you're paying for 1/10 or 1/20th of a Megapack if you were installing your own charging system at the at your factory, at your balling area. So if it was 1/10, it would be, $200,000, so doubling up the price of it, but then you get a tax credit off that. Tesla, I think, because of their cash position, can step up and make it and then just lease it back. So then the company would end up paying for it either with higher, per kilowatt charges or some leasing charge or something like that. Just like you pay for FSD, either you pay $15,000 or you pay $2,400 per year. Ultimately you'll come through and probably be priced out over a 6-year period if you don't want to pay for it. But the tax incentives make it, a relatively easy thing to do for the next potentially 10 years to do that. But for Tesla, one of the main things is that the demand would be there, because if I'm, having all these, hundreds or thousands of trucks and they're charging these massive rates, then ultimately I will, they'd be soaking up the energy of entire gigawatt power plants. But then because you want to have these megapacks in to buffer the grid so that instead of sucking down 2 megawatts in a half an hour, I have the charge in the megapack, and the megapack would only be able to supply 6 to 8 trucks before it's expended. 3.9 megawatt hours going into that. Like if I'm dumping in 700 kilowatt hours at a go, after 5, I'm near empty for the megapack. So I'm wanting to fill that megapack up, ideally at night or something like that. But then I can only fill up 5. So if I have some generation on site, I can then refill 1. But it's if I have this heavy usage, it's really straining what I'm doing. So if I have a really big power line coming in, so the megapack can fill up after 8 hours, then I can cycle through the megapack 3 times and go, and then I spread out that discharge, over, if I'm doing 5 discharge, I can slow it down by 2x or 3x, so that I'm straining the grid less on it.
Brian, I did a bunch of research after our video, and I'm curious if there's anybody that's in our audience today that can help with this, because boy, it is really hard to find these numbers. Based on what I was able to find, the 100,000 miles a year that the average semi drives might be high.
Mm-hmm.
I found numbers as low as 35,000 miles a year, but I think that's low. So I don't know if anybody has solid numbers on actual semis as opposed to all large trucks. So let's just, because they mix them up sometimes in some of the stats, but I don't know. And I was in manufacturing and distribution my entire career, and lots and lots of truckers that I knew, they weren't running their trucks 24/7. They were running their trucks 8/5. They were home on the weekends, or they were working the weekends and they were home a couple of days during the week, or they worked for 20 straight days and they were home for 4 days. So there's a host of different ways that these trucks are used. Plus I found that there was a very low percentage that are going out full. They're not 100% full. And then I was in the water bottle business. I guarantee you, when you send out a truckload of water bottles, it doesn't weigh 40,000 pounds. So there's lots and lots of use cases where they're not going to be using this as much energy per day as we might think they're going to be using in order to require quite as many trucks per megacharger. Bradford, what do you think?
So I would think about kind of the city to city loads or routes. So I'm in Indianapolis, and they call it the crossroads of America. So you got Chicago to the northwest, about 180 miles. So you could have a truck go out and come back within 10 hours. That's like worst case. And so a lot of trucks in Indianapolis, I think, are used like twice a day. So you have routes to Cincinnati, Louisville, other places like that, probably to like other logistics places in Illinois and Ohio. So if you think about like 350 miles to Chicago and back, and you do that 365 days a year, that's pretty close to 100,000, I think.
Yeah. So if you multiply
that's
six,
just one trip.
Yeah. 6 times 400 times 50, you're at 120,000 miles. 5 times 400 per day times, for 50 weeks, that's 100,000. So if you're going down to the lower numbers, then if you're doing it every day, then if you're looking at 300 miles, then you're looking at 75,000. Again, taking 2 weeks off, or 250 miles, then you're down to 62,000. So, it's.
But you're right about like, you think about a bottler, where, maybe they're not just carrying around the bottles, but also the liquid in the bottles. And I'm guessing a lot of those trucks are maybe less, so like under 250 miles a day. So 100,000 maybe on the high side for sure, but it's still like it's a no-brainer, and like you save even more on brakes using a Tesla semi in the city or out and about around the city. I think we've all seen the Pepsi truck or the Budweiser truck that is pretty substantial and does need a Tesla semi to bring it around town.
I'm in distribution center of America. I'm in Riverside, California, and I'm sitting here, 2 miles from the 60 freeway, which is, the direct route to the ports. And so you've got these truckers that are going down to the ports. They're sitting there waiting in line for an hour or two. Then they finally get their location. Now it takes another however long to put that container onto the truck. Now that truck goes maybe 60, maybe 70, maybe 80 miles to a distribution center. And during rush hour traffic, it's always rush hour here. Anyway, and so he's got an 80 mile trip. By the time he unloads and get back to the port, he might be done for the day. If he could make 2 of those trips, maybe he's going to do that 240 or 300. But this is the kind of, I think we're assuming that all of these trucks are going to be used for these long hauls. A lot of them are going to be used for, like you said, in city. You pick it up now at the distribution center. Somebody else comes up, picks that load up, and takes it to a local Walmart, and unloads it at the Walmart.
Gary Carson in the comments said, I think it would be better for Tesla to own the Megapacks than sell them to the semi buyers. Tesla can sell the electricity to the semi customers and also sell to the grid at high peak loads and make better utilization of the Megapacks, getting a twofer, eluding the customer the capex. So so that's a good point by Gary.
Yeah, are there questions? Anybody, jump in. I know Phil put his hand up earlier and then he took it down. Maybe we, talked too long, Phil.
But Larry Goldberg can speak now. Larry, go ahead. You can speak. Seems to have shut off. Okay. Another interesting point is that and we can always stay on the other topic, but the 80 mile per hour speed, Tesla can, because they may have an abundance of energy for these shorter trips, they can go at the higher rates, and then the cost to them is far less than for the diesel truck. The diesel truck, wants to go at 50 miles per hour because they go higher, then they have 20% more costs for the year, $100,000 or whatever. While for Tesla, if they're at $20,000 or $15,000, and then they use a bit more, that's only another $2,000 for the year. So then them speeding up, possibly making more runs, would also be a huge benefit. And also, it would mean that the 55 mile speed limit might become less of a thing if the truck can safely do it, and would make highway driving better and easier because you're not following behind a couple of really slow 55 mile per hour semi trucks and making it difficult to pass them on single lane roads, because they can go at the more proper speed of traffic of 65, 75 miles per hour.
So guys, I wanted to make a few comments about some of the discussion with Larry. Couple of things. Firstly, the average miles traveled by a Class 8 truck is only about 62,000 miles a year. And that is an average, because I think we're confusing quite a few things here. There are different use cases for Class 8 trucks, and the different use cases, it means a very dramatic difference in the use of the truck. The one category of use that is very large, very high mileage, but relatively small percentage of all the trucks are long haul. So over the road, it's called. And over the road really is, multi-state transport, so across the US or from Chicago to the West Coast and so on. And those trips are just not in the semi's wheelhouse right now, because it doesn't have a sleeper truck. It isn't sold with as in a sleeper truck configuration, and it can't really be used in practical terms for over the road purpose. The other use of a Class 8 truck that is not over the road is sort of intercity, within city delivery, and the semi is not really built for that, because it has a double axle. What's called a double axle, which means it's got 3 rows of wheels on the pad. That really makes it quite difficult to maneuver in the city. So typically those are single axle cabs without sleepers on them, and that's what that's used for. And that's a much lower mileage, but it tends to be, in and out of the depot quite frequently, such as described with those containers. So the regional and local deliveries is really what the semi is built for, and that's going to be a much lower average, probably 40,000 miles, maybe 45,000 miles. That's the kind of use that I think Brad was talking about, getting to a relatively close city. Although 350 miles there and back is a little bit long for a local delivery, because it means that the drivers are probably going to be on the road for too many hours for the day. So I think the limit there is about a 250-mile run. So you have to balance all of these things, and the semis use cases really are probably about a third to 40% of the total number of trucks sold a year. But in that category, in its current configuration, it's dramatically more economic than current types of Class 8 trucks. And that's really what we're talking about, particularly when we talk about local infrastructure by the actual buyer of the truck, building that local infrastructure. The only other point I'll make is that typically these trucks need to refuel roughly the same time, or in the same time scales, or the same time of the day. So it probably means more megapacks per truck than we've been estimating. Those are my, that's kind of my observations of what I've heard so far.
Larry, I was wondering, with your knowledge, my speculation would be that these trucks are not running at night. So wouldn't a lot of the charging be able to be done overnight?
Yeah, that's a very good observation, and the answer is yes. So, I've given some thought to that, and it seems that there would have to be some staffing around supporting the work at night. So, one of the points I'll make is that right now we're in the experimental stage. So the use cases that we've talked about, some of them are really, really apt and some are not that appropriate. But these use cases are going to need a lot of research by the users. I mean, you know, I think that anybody, Randy, I'm sure you'll align with this, that anybody who's built an industrial operation understands that there's a lot of work to perfecting the process. And I think that until that process is perfected, pricing by Tesla and sort of the business model is going to be in flux. So I think it's going to take a while to figure out. I think the advantages are pretty, to all a massive advantage. And there are other manufacturers that are rolling out electrical trucks, but of course, none of them begin to compete at the level of efficiency of the Tesla semi, which puts it in a class of its own. So that'll play into pricing, but I don't think the pricing I've heard up to now is realistic. I think if we're able to get $150,000 to $200,000 per truck, I think it'll be a lot in the current marketplace. You know, maybe as these use cases become much clearer, and the advantages are you know made manifest, perhaps the prices will rise accordingly. But that's my feeling at the moment.
I think that, again, as someone who has been manufacturing and distribution my entire life, I think that your tendency, well, some people's tendency is to be a first mover. You don't want to be caught short on this. You don't want your competitor to be sitting there with a 5% cost advantage because they can move the freight for almost free compared to you. So I think there's already lots and lots and lots of orders. Well, let's call them reservations with significant amounts of money behind those reservations. I also think I like what you're saying, Barry, about the testing and the experimentation that's going to take place, because at the end of the day, I think we're only talking, 20 to 30,000 vehicles next year, and they're only hoping for 50,000 the following year. Well, that's not a lot of trucks to sell.
Yeah, 20,000 trucks are a hell of a lot of trucks, and it's more than a third of the total the total line haul trucks sold a year. Well, 160 in a bad year, 200 and something in a good year. So I mean, I love the point that the Next Big Future made about the potential of changing out the entire fleet, but these things don't happen that quickly or that overnight. But, I think that it's 50,000, 40,000 in 2024. I wrote a blog about. I wrote a thread about this. I think it's a reach, but in China, it's not. I think that in China, the opportunity for 100,000 a year within a couple of years is really within reach because of the volumes of trucks there are gigantic.
Just one thought, and then to Bradford. One thought to me, I think shouldn't sell them for less per kilowatt hour than they sell a Model Y. So I'm thinking they should raise the price to 350,000 or 400,000 immediately. Bradford, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to Indianapolis. So to Chicago, it's 180 miles, and back it's 180 miles. So, net it's about 360. So it just depends on the side of town you go to in Chicago. So, even if you're driving 65 or 70 and you have a strong headwind on I-65, I think these semis are going to flow to cities where you have routes like that first. Beyond like the bottling first movers, there definitely is a first mover thing to keep in mind. I think you have a good point there, Randy. So maybe the city truck that does less than 60,000 miles, maybe it won't be used as much. yeah, I'm curious to see how this shapes out, but there is a lot of trucking that happens between cities, and some cities will just be too far apart. So, you know, as cities are 300 miles or more apart, maybe it doesn't make sense, but you could also charge while the truck is unloading at the destination. So if it's, let's see, you know, 300 miles might be a little too far because you don't want to be driving much more than 8 hours a day. So maybe like 250 or less would be workable, and you charge when you're unloading. So I'm excited about this. And you also made a other good point, Brian, is that you have the cost of transportation going down, where not only is it cars and SUVs, but we're looking at trucks now, and pickup trucks, and eventually vans and other things. So if transportation is 8 or 9% of the CPI, and it may be more in some other countries, you know, what if that gets cut in half? I think that's pretty exciting. The cost per mile with electric vehicles, you know, lowering our prices paid overall, and could lower our food costs. Tony Seba's going a little wild on that right now. Mm-hmm. A lot of our food costs are because of transportation. So curious if you've done any more thinking on that, Brian, or if you want to talk about the idea.
Yeah, I have. Other people can comment as well. But so I think that, yeah, when this thing gets to scale, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about, is that Tesla is the one who set up to go to scale. Like when you talk about competitors, you know, the e-Cascadia from Freightliner and the other companies, you know, for them to get up to 40,000 trucks in 2024 or 2025, if it takes a bit longer, that's going to use about 40 gigawatt hours of the, you know, basically the entire Nevada supply of 2170s would then go towards that. So then if Freightliner or someone else is saying, okay, yes, I've made a few e-Cascadia trucks and some other things which have, you know, 150 or 200 mile range, that they need to have a massive supply of tens of gigawatt hours of batteries. And if you say, oh, we're going to go to 200,000 trucks because it's, you know, 2 million trucks being ordered in China, you know, so you have truck factories made in each location, that this, you know, at the endpoints, you're going to be converting the whole system so that, yeah, delivery charges the 10% or so that goes to moving things around. Supply chain becomes vastly more efficient and lower cost, where you can get to a point where instead of 10%, it's down to 3% or even 2% if you have the platooning vehicles where you are drafting behind and getting even more efficient. It's you know, toward the scale of the shift from maybe not as big as, you know, going from horse-drawn carriages to the first cars, but, you know, something from the early trains to, you know, steam trains up to, you know, diesel locomotives kind of things, where it got a lot bigger and better, and then the potential to speed things up to 80 miles per hour, that you can get to the point where it's more powerful than rail locomotives, you know, to get electrify that as well. So there's potential to revamp the larger economy, and if it's the wedge to get many megapacks and get the whole energy grid thing adjusted. So currently there's about 540 terawatts hours of renewable wind and solar in the United States, and a lot of that is not stored at all or correctly. You know, they do some what they call curtailment, where basically there's too much wind power, say in Texas or someplace else, and then 5% of the energy is wasted. So, and the sun energy could be generated at the wrong time, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., and you want it at 6 p.m. to 9. So if this is the wedge to get us into a few terawatt hours of storage. Tesla wanted to get to 2 terawatt hours per year was their goal in Battery Day for themselves, and then to 10 terawatts for everyone else. That getting to those kinds of scales seems to be Tesla alone pushing to that level to get to those massive terawatt hours. Anyway, so Bradford, you wanted to respond?
I had a question for Randy. So there, sometimes you see these semis that are pulling a train shipping container behind them. I'm curious about anything that's being done in that space, or why we don't see it more often, where it just made it much more easy, where you're just moving around these train containers.
I think most of those that you see are coming off of trains or coming off of out of the port. So a container is not necessarily the greatest thing to pack a mixed load. Remember, a ton of loads are mixed loads. All right, nothing is, I think everybody tends to think of these loads as like, okay, the whole place is filled with Pepsi cans, but it's much more likely that it's, a couple of pallets of Pepsi cans and some Frito-Lays. And then there's another couple of pallets from some other company over here that was going the same direction that trucker was able to pick up along the way. And then when he gets to his destination, he's all over his distribution. He's all over his computer trying to find out if there's a load he can pick up now in Chicago to get back to Indianapolis. So, and maybe that's only a half a load, or maybe he has to deadhead back, which means he's got nothing. He's got no load going back. So, but to answer your specific question, those are typically off of trains or off of ships, where the container in those cases is necessary to manage the tremendous amount of I don't know, what would you call it, potential damage that they can do if they're not loaded the way they're loaded and built the way they're built.
One thing that I just did was in my spreadsheet where I was analyzing semi-truck sales, if I cap it, before my lowercase was capping at 400,000, I cap at 200,000 by 2028. So basically kind of scaling up, 20,000, 2024, 60,000, 2025, et cetera. Then the batteries that go into semi-truck will be 631. If the Megapacks are 1 in 5, somebody said we may need more Megapacks per semi in order to properly balance this out. Then it's like 630 gigawatt hours by 2030 of Megapacks, and then another 700 gigawatt hours for the Megapacks. So the combined is 1.4 terawatt hours for those things, and the Megapacks start getting to really large scale. And then that also doesn't take into account that maybe the Cybertrucks and Cybervans sell in larger numbers and are sucking power at 1/10 or something of the semis, to mean that we upgrade all of the superchargers to megacharging superchargers, depending upon zoning and stuff like that. But then to get to a really large number of the Megapacks, and overbuilding them a bit, if you have auto bidder and other load balancing arrangements, then as Carson pointed out, there's other ways for Tesla to monetize and use those packs for other customers and purposes.
I'm gonna take the opposite tack. I'm gonna take the tack that we're gonna need less of those mega chargers. Why not? We want to see all the sides. My theory is going to go something like this: that the use case that we're talking about, where if it's true that we're only talking about, and I don't know, quite frankly, whether we're only talking about these day trips back and forth, or back and forth a couple of times, whatever, in more regional environments, then I think a lot of the charging is going to be done overnight. If the charging is done overnight, then it's going to be worth it to have a staffer who's going to you're going to have a what do you call it, a robot charger that comes over and sticks itself in the side of the truck. But I think you're going to be able to slow charge. You won't have to use this massive 1,000 kilowatt charger to do this job. You may only have, 3 or 4 trucks at that particular facility. Maybe you've got 10. There's going to be some of these facilities are only going to be 2 trucks. Some of them are driver-owned trucks, are small fleets of 2, 5, 10 trucks, and they might need 1 Megapack for that fleet of 10, but they might not need any Megapack for a fleet of 2. So I think there's going to be sometimes when it's going to be able to be drawn off the grid without any real challenge. I think there's also going to be a time when a factory owner or a distribution center who can't quite see the use case for solar on the roof, solar over the parking, and a Megapack, once they buy a couple of trucks, all of a sudden now they do have the use case. And now you've got a huge benefit to the environment, because it's hard for me to imagine a better way to knock down the amount of energy we use than to put solar on the top of every factory and every warehouse distribution center in the country and back it up with the Megapack.
So if you're going to do slow charging overnight, 10 hours, something like that, then you're looking at still 10 times the charging rate of a, for an 80 kilowatt hour, like Model X or something like that. So you'd have to, be plugging in like multiple normal outlets in order to make it happen. I guess it could happen for a few number of trucks in order to avoid the need for Megapack, but you'd have to be putting in a really large industrial strength breaker for sure in order to get this to go. Otherwise, you're going to be taking 3 days or 2 days, something like that, to charge your truck with something more ordinary.
Guys, I think that we're really getting down to the level of detail that honestly we can't foresee what the opportunities are in the use cases. But I think if we want to think at scale, one of the things that I would really want to think about is the scale that we could reach in the Asia Pacific, particularly in countries like India and China, where very, very long runs are required, where the level of rules of the road are not quite what they are here, and where we don't have the rules for driving that we have here, and the appetite for scaling infrastructure is very high indeed, because the payback is very large. So I think, there's a huge opportunity for intercity travel, say in China and in India. I'm not sure across country because of the fantastic railroads they have, but the opportunity for scaling very large in those countries are immense in terms of volumes. I mean, China, for example, or the Indo-Pacific is like 14 times the size of market that the US market is. So it just gives you a sense of scale, of the opportunity of scale.
That's a very good point, Larry. So China does have, has ordered as many as nearly 2 million trucks in a year.
Right.
Some of them they don't, I think, use Class 8. I think they use large and medium and stuff like that, because they have a more wider range of truck sizes. But clearly Tesla can handle anything from the large to the small. And yes, the opportunity in China in particular and in other parts of Asia is larger than North America and Europe by about 3, 4, possibly 5 times bigger opportunity. So then the factories for those Asia trucks will clearly be built there, and China's have the battery supply. So China's CATL and BYD and CALB, all those guys, when I looked at that, their making the factories for about 2 terawatt hours. If all the stuff comes through, they spend about $200 million, I think, already to do it, and to get to 2025 to have 2 terawatt hours of batteries, which would be, I think at 1.2 terawatt hours, you're roughly looking at how much you might need for 50 million cars, especially if a large portion of those cars are small China market cars that are sub $10,000, sub $15,000. So the excess, air quotes, excess batteries would start appearing in 2025, where you'd want to stick them into stationary storage and semis if you have the utility for them, which we appear to have. So then building the factory, the second Shanghai factory or someplace else, to make more megapacks and more, not necessarily semi, but semi / other large trucks for the China market would be a huge thing. And then competitive wise, BYD makes electric buses and has for over a decade, but for the last 10 years they only made 70,000, and those buses use are lower weight and use fewer batteries. So competition wise, to get to really big scale, 100,000 trucks a year, something like that, I don't see who the competitor is. Like, fine, you have the a truck, something viable, but the scale you're manufacturing, where you can make and utilize 100 gigawatt hours of batteries and then make a charging system for it, et cetera. It seems to be Tesla's, to have and to run away with for, over 5 years plus. It took Tesla all this time to make a truck this level. And I think the technological lead that they have on it is bigger than what the Model 3 or Model Y or Model S had over the Nissan Leaf and the other vehicles that were in the market there at the time. The Nissan Leaf had less than, I think, 100 miles of range initially, and that's the same thing we're talking about here, where the range on these other vehicles is far less, and the scale of their factories and battery production is just less. So yeah, getting to the China market at scale is the hugest opportunity for Tesla, for the trucks. And I think the China government would should say, totally, if you can do this, our air pollution problem, which is taking off 7% of our GDP, not talking about, whatever health problem it's causing, but, reducing their GDP because of, need to clean water and do other things. And, reducing their dependence on foreign oil, I think that they would, totally support, do everything they can to help Tesla to make that conversion as fast as possible.
I agree completely, and I would add a few points, and that is, they're already beginning the climb, up the graph at a very rapid rate. I mean, this year, new energy truck sales rose by 500%. So when we talk about scaling, they're already, at the elbow of the curve, and Tesla needs to move very rapidly because their product is so superior. And the other thing about the Tesla product is, you correctly state that China rates their trucks differently. They have a large category, which is both our category, our 8 and our 7 categories, and the Tesla design can be scaled to either of those 2 categories by simply dropping one axle and also reducing battery and or motor power. And so the opportunity to scale at very rapid rates and build a factory rapidly and start scale up production rapidly is much greater in China than it is here. So my own analysis is that they could build a business as large as their car business in their truck business within a couple of years if they leverage the China and the rest of Asia Pacific rapidly.
And that's the rub. So Brian and I spent a lot of time talking about this on the video the other day. The rub is there's so many opportunities in so little time, and so And so where does Tesla, where does Elon Musk? I don't think Elon Musk is commonly the one who has the limitation on the bandwidth, but I do think there's always going to be an organizational bandwidth. You can't do, I would love to have them build 5 new battery Megapack factories next year. I think they should. I think that would be smart. 5 times Lathrop would put them almost to the point of where they would be equaling or beat the profits of the car division. I'd love to see them build 200,000 trucks next year. You just can't do all of it. So where should they go? How do they manage that bandwidth problem?
Randy, it's a margin issue. I heard your calculation on the battery factory at Lathrop, and I challenged the margin assumption. Margins in energy are dramatically lower than margins in a car because of the added value surrounding the battery in the car is dramatically higher than the added value surrounding the batteries in a Megapack. And so getting to a 30% margin, I think, is way out of whack. I think it's closer to a 10 or 12% margin. Right now, they're earning a couple of percent margin, but that's because they have high fixed costs. But even if you ignore the fixed costs, you're not going to get much more than 10 or 12. But the opportunity to build a semi-business that's larger than the car, as large as the car business, I think trumps anything else they could do in terms of build, other than perhaps a lower cost, a lower cost car. So I think the two are not, they're not mutually exclusive. I think you can probably build a factory for both at the same time, and the battery requirement for the semi is somewhat different to the battery requirement for the car. But I think you could do both. I think the fact that they are starting the semi indicates that they should. Anyway, that's just my views.
Interesting point, Larry. Bradford?
Yeah, and I know we're all waiting with bated breath about where the next gigafactories are going to be. What I can say is that Tesla has a team that does building in Europe. They have a team does building in China, Asia, and they have a team in the U.S. So I'm hopeful that they'll make some decisions and be moving forward with some other big factories soon. I'm not sure if they would do 4 or 5 at the same time. It seems like they want to build at one location and then try and learn from it. And it was a bit of a disappointment, I think, with Berlin. I think they wanted to get Berlin done first and learn from that and apply some of those learnings to Texas, but unfortunately, they happened around the same time. And I hope Tesla forms more teams too that can do this kind of work.
I think that's kind of my point, Bradford, is that yes, we know that there's teams in place. I ran a manufacturing business on a very much smaller scale. I mean, we're talking a little bitty tiny scale compared to Elon. But even when you have a small manufacturing plant, it's like, okay, how far can I push this division if I've also got to push this division, and then I've got this other division over here. There's a point at which you do make choices. You can't do it all. And Larry, I challenge why there would be a limit on the margins to Lathrop. It seems to me that with the push by governments all over the world to go to wind solar battery, with the absolute limitation on the number of batteries and the absolute limitation on the raw materials to feed those batteries, it would seem to me that the only limitation on what Tesla can charge for their batteries is what Elon wants to make.
I have very simple evidence to prove my case.
Good.
Just look at the margins that they're currently earning in the energy business.
Think that are we actually getting enough? Maybe I'm just not seeing it. Are we actually getting?
It's not. Yeah, it's not at scale. Those margins aren't at scale yet. Like Lathrop hasn't been scaled, so we don't know. Like I don't think it's 40%, but I don't see how it can't be 30.
Brad, even if you scale, your scale is not going to make the difference between 2% and 30%. It could make it.
Are we seeing enough granular evidence of what the actual profit margin is on a Megapack as opposed to the overall energy division?
Well, the Megapack is like 80% of the energy division right now. It's $1 billion. It grew from 200 million to $1 billion. And the margins are still at, the low 2%. So, I mean, I think it's pretty manifest that the margins on battery packs, on Megapacks, are dramatically smaller than the margins on cars. And that makes all the sense in the world when you look at the scale of the battery and the added value around the battery in the Megapack versus the battery in the car and the added value around the Megapack in the car.
But if there's unlimited demand, Larry, that's my question. So I'm a marketer. That's what I do. I'm a salesman. Okay. Forget that I had a factory for all those years. That was a crazy thought. Who knows why I end up being a factory guy? Because I'm really a sales and marketing guy. Mm-hmm. If there's we know that their order book is filled through or at least into 2024. At this point, it might be filled beyond 2024 because this massive international demand for energy storage at the utility level. And that doesn't count what Tesla could be doing in terms of their own utility level or their own energy stations, the power stations for the cars. They need Megapacks at those stations. So with a massive need for these things, and the supply demand is way out of whack. Why are they charging less than they should? You say they booked up for several years, but they booked up at today's prices, and today's price is just that margin. So where's the evidence that you're right, that they could earn these massive sales at higher margins? I don't see the evidence, and I'm looking for it.
So some information that we have on that. Well, one thing is, Brad had to drop off. One thing is that Drew Baglino and Elon have said at things in 2020 and later, Megapack has room to grow to achieve our targets, and can reach the these higher levels of margin. So let me just see. Tesla aiming for comparable margins in energy storage as in vehicles. So that was an article in 2021, April. I think they've said that they can get to vehicle level margins with Megapack. So they have said that they can do it. The other thing is that the Inflation Reduction Act, gives these 50% tax incentives, which seems to me to translate to 20% or better potential boost in margin. So that would the Inflation Reduction Act would solve that margin issue in the United States for 10 years while they have that active. And
not to the extent of 30%. I mean, right now they're at 2 or 3%. To go from 2 or 3% to 30%, having sold out 2 years of production, seems to me.
No, directly from the tax credits. Directly from the tax credits. If I get like a 50% tax incentive.
Tax credits are not 30% of revenue, or even close. I think it's like, you can calculate it out, but I haven't done it.
Well, if it's 50% tax incentive, then so basically I can write off half of it. Then that means that if I have a 30% tax rate times 50%, then that's 15%, right? If I have a 40% tax rate, then it's 20%, right?
No, but you can only write off half of your cost. You're not going to write off the whole selling price.
So you don't think it's the whole selling price that's included by project for those? I don't know. Like that's the details about the Inflation Reduction Act that is unclear to me. But then for the good margins on the Powerwall and Megapacks, like, Elon and Drew have said that they're going to get there. So we'll see. Proof in the pudding. They should be, if they get there to 10 gigawatt hours, 12 gigawatt hours per quarter, because they've ramped up Lathrop, then have they gone from like no margin and minimal margin like they have with low levels of production in Austin, Berlin, to good margin? Because there's no question that Austin, Berlin will get there. It's a question of do Megapacks get there? I have a question from Gary Carson in there. What is the Megapack ROI on energy arbitrage with AutoBidder? How much does that software help? Have you done the math on a Megapack that aren't sold but are owned by Tesla to reduce clipping and stabilize the grid? Have you done the math on a Megapack? I'm not unclear on that question.
Bradford, did you have something?
Yeah. So, what was the question? Sorry, go ahead and think. Lost in thought. You guys can talk.
So, I did promise this morning. It's on another subject, but I did promise in my Twitter feed this morning that I had this idea this morning. I'll throw it out. It's been trying to figure out why Tesla stock is stuck under 200, can't get back to its old numbers. We know that the overall market is down roughly the same percentage as Tesla, but it doesn't make sense when Tesla is growing the way it's growing. So I have a brand new idea just popped into my brain.
Before you go into that, the Bradford has his hand. We'll go that first and then go to your topic. Bradford?
Is Bradford, are you able to speak? We can't hear you.
Bradford shows.
I added the speaker. I added the speaker. Go ahead. I'm giving you the invite to add to the speaker, Bradford.
He's showing his speaker. Wonder if he's having a technical problem at his end. All right. So, Bradford, let us know. Throw up your hand again. Are you there? All right. I'll set it up again. Why is Tesla stuck? Why is the stock stuck at under 200? And I had this brand new idea. I'd love to hear if anybody has any thoughts on this. I think it's because that the average stock picker out there, the person that's making a decision, has a hard time believing that the company can continue to do what defies gravity. There has never been a company this large grow this fast with these margins ever in history. It's not even close. And to imagine that they could add another 50, or we're estimating more than 50, our group, by the way, for those of you who may not know it, Brian and Dr. Know-It-All, John and Best in Tesla, Lars and I recently wrote a book called The Elon Musk Mission. We hope you'll buy it. So we're estimating go more than a 50% growth in sales and probably 100%, more than 100% growth in profits next year. People have, I think, a hard time at this point imagining that a company that's already breaking records like crazy in terms of growth could possibly continue to have that kind of growth year after year after year out into 2030 in order to justify the kind of PE that they would have to have. If the PE is going to be over 60, it's going to be 80 or 100 like it was, you have to see this 50% growth year after year after year after year. It seems to defy gravity.
So my thinking is that that Tesla, kind of saves up, this overperformance corporately, and then they have these big surges. I think there was spring loaded. So I think it's getting spring loaded again. And when if they have they had the China production at 100,000 in November, and everything seems to be queuing up for 450,000 plus deliveries, probably 500,000 production for Q4. But then they put out the FUD about China demand, which could affect 20,000 cars, so 430 or 480. But then if we have the 75,000 cars per quarter from Austin, and then another 75,000 cars from Berlin in Q1, then if you have 300,000 cars potentially from China, and then a surge in demand from the US because of the $7,500 tax credit, then you have 150, 160,000 cars from Fremont in Q1, 75,000 from Austin. You look at 230,000, 240,000 cars in Q1 in the US alone, without probably having to reduce prices because they have $7,500 tax cut. Then that should be heading towards probably about like $7 billion of net income from that, nearly 600,000 cars. And then you'll have another $2 billion, well, over $1 billion from Inflation Reduction Act, $600 million from making the batteries and stuff like that. If you don't have to reduce prices, you get another 600 million. So then there could be this, and if FSD attachment rate goes up and other things, all will kind of be revealed in this first quarter. We'll get a very good sense of it, a little bit with 1 month of information from Q4, but really it'll show in Q1. I'm expecting that to be, something that can get up to even double digits, $10 billion in Q1. But more conservatively at the $8 or $9 billion, that would force all the analysts to revise what's going to be happening for 2023. If they pull it off 2 quarters in a row, and then then that's when they fully believe. I think they could.
So my thinking is, I agree with you 100%. As you know, I'm probably even more optimistic, but my analogy on this was Apple. And I think everybody in the room was probably around and probably watching Apple, 13 years ago, when they were bouncing up against $1 trillion.
Not a trillion back then. I think they were far, far lower. I think they were at far lower numbers. But
well, I'm sorry. Whenever it was that they got
$100 billion something.
Well, they got to almost $1 trillion in capital, in market capitalization, and they were bouncing up close to $1 trillion for like. I need to go back and actually research this because I'm going off of memory at this point. But it seems like it was forever, like for 2 years. They kept beating, bouncing up against $1 trillion. Well, there had never been $1 trillion company before. You follow me?
So they broke $1 trillion in 2018. If you're talking about 2013, they briefly broke up to over 500 billion in 2013, and then they dropped back down below that to 330, and then it took them about 2-3 years to get to totally break through the 500 billion level.
See how my memory is going south?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Before that, they got stuck at about 170 billion in 2008, and then dropped back down to 80. But then once things recovered in 2010, they firmly broke through that $200 billion level. So they had several periods where they were at, growing quickly but then they get stuck at 165 billion, and then took a while to convincingly break through up to 170, like basically about like 2-3 years. So it'd be like semi-step changes where like every 3 years they'd bust through to 2-3 times higher.
Okay, I'm gonna shut up about the Apple thing until I go back and do my research. That was because it was just in my brain. Anyway, Bradford, you got a thought?
I am a financial advisor. It's not financial advice. hffinancial.com/disclaimer. But I agree that this feels like a period where we've gotten a lot of good news of fundamental advancement in the business, and the stock's lower. So I agree it's coiling like a spring. Wall Street wants to see things on the bottom line. They want to see the impact on profits. So I'd agree with you, and they want if let's say they do FSD revenue recognition, then Wall Street's going to want to see, okay, the higher profits in Q1. They won't give them credit for the past, and they may not. They may be too lazy to put it in their models for the future, but then we'll start to see the impact on a quarterly basis. Going back briefly to margins is, it's hard to keep all these things in our head. There's the ITC tax credit when businesses put in solar, and it used to be like you had to put in solar with storage to get the tax credit. With the legislation now, you don't have to. So you can put in storage without having to put in solar and get a 30% credit. So the argument could be made that Tesla could raise prices by about 25%. You got added gross margin that way. They'll get some benefit definitely from putting the batteries in the modules at Giga Nevada or Lathrop. Panasonic is debating whether they get the credit from Gigafactory Nevada, so that's under debate now. Clearly, as things scale, the battery cost is going to go down over time. You're really giving us a case for a flood of batteries. Even though Larry's cautious in many ways, he thinks the semi business could be as big as the automobile for some time. That means more batteries, and I think Tesla Semi gives Tesla another way to offload batteries if people are bulking at the Model 3 or the Model Y price. They can put more batteries in the storage and more batteries in the semi, and this just gives them another way to do it. So I think it may add some stability to Tesla long term, as far as smoothing out demand and offloading things. So I'm pretty excited, and I was pretty excited to listen to your video and the insight. I think you may be a little more bullish than I am, but I like I like to dream about things and brainstorm, and then we can shoot holes in things. So I appreciate the space.
Thank you, Bradford, and thanks, Larry. Dr. Know-it-all, do you have any comments about any of this?
Oh, hey, well, I joined kind of late, so I've just been listening and actually learning a lot, because I'm not a super expert in the transportation industry, so this is actually an opportunity to learn. I don't know, did you guys talk before I got in at all about the lack of announcement about full self-driving or any autonomous driving software with the semi?
No, we didn't talk about that.
Big gaping hole in the announcement. I was like, where was that?
Yeah, you would think that they talked about it in the first one 5 years before, talked about the fact that they would do platooning, but then they didn't actually talk about that. So then speculation was that they didn't want to take the spotlight off of the megawatts and the supercharging and all that stuff.
Right. Have they released the real-time version of the person driving the 8-hour drive? Because the high-speed one, it definitely looks like he had some sort of traffic-aware cruise control, because it did not look like he was using the pedal, but definitely was steering. It looks like Bradford might have an answer to that question.
I think one reason why they didn't talk about FSD is I think they have a lot of demand from the fleet operators who are a little more open-minded, and the bottlers and things like that. So I think they wanted to make the event where it's more about the driver. I think it's another reason why they didn't emphasize the cost savings at the event, because drivers really don't care how much their company saves. So I think there were some things they definitely held back, and I feel like maybe is to make it a more driver friendly, but also, to me, it says like that there's a lot of orders, and maybe they don't need more demand right now, and they can sell it more to the public when they need to do that.
I don't think there's any question about the FSD still being part of the project. It was mentioned recently. I don't know whether that was the third quarter call, but at some point Elon was specifically asked whether a question about the number of cameras in the semi versus the number of cameras in cars, and he said, no, it's all the same.
Okay, well then actually what Bradford said might make some sense. That, I mean, because I expected them to talk about convoy mode. That was the part that I thought was that they would have a human driver and then have, you know, 2 or 3 or however many trucks behind them. But if it was sort of a driver centric thing, they might not want to go like, and you're going to lose your job.
Right.
So yeah, so okay, that might make some sense.
The other thing was that Europe has done some platooning tests where they did, you know, like platooning across multiple countries. I think it's been over a year, almost 2 years since they did that. But they had to get a bunch of special highway approvals to make that happen. And then when they crossed, you know, national boundaries and stuff like that, they had to get even more stuff. So in terms of the regulatory aspects to actually just do that, there are some hurdles there. So
I'm having trouble trying to picture it. I'm a freeway guy. Okay, I've lived in Southern California for 55 years and spent, you know, an hour a day each way on the freeway for a lot of that. I'm trying to figure out how you get that platoon on and off the road. I've been stopped by funeral processions. So how am I going to get off the road when I'm next to one of these convoys, unless it's only 3 trucks? You know, I think there are some logistical questions.
Well, I think that's easier actually for platooning. If you have a software connection to get them to follow closely, they can detect, okay, there's someone that wants to come in, they can separate them, versus the, you know, physical hitch between, you know, having 2 trailers going behind. And I think in Australia and stuff, they can have like 3 trailers all once. So then it's like physically they cannot separate. You must, you know, wait for this 130-foot thing to pass you or to clear out of the way for you to move out. But with the robotic type thing, they can just say, okay, I can just increase my gap and let something pass through.
But guys, in some of the western states and the mountain states I was in recently, Montana, Wisconsin, and South Dakota, there were plenty of trucks with 3 trailers behind them, plenty. In fact, that was the norm. It was exceptional to see one with only 2 or 1 trailer behind.
Well, so I agree with Larry. I was going to say, Randy, I think Southern California might have skewed. If you head out to the middle western part of the U.S., you can just drive for hours, and there's not that much traffic and a lot of room for, especially if you did it with software. As Brian said, that you could then split them up as needed. But I think it's more those kinds of trips, not the between Los Angeles and San Diego. I think that probably is not the ideal use case for a platoon.
So does Lars have any comments, something about the European market? I know you've looked at the truck situation over there.
Yeah, not specific, but I think it's gonna be a long time before we actually see semi trucks, Tesla semi trucks over here. Just because of the demand we're talking about and specifically made for the US. But I actually have a question, because I have also, like Dr. Nolan, just been sitting here listening, because this is also a space I'm not very confident in. So, because we're talking a lot about what Tesla can earn of selling all these semi trucks, but I haven't really talked too much about how many money Tesla can save themselves, because we have Pepsi that is their first customer, and Tesla themselves. Because I'm just thinking, Tesla last year delivered 300,000 cars in the US alone. Well, I got no idea, what does Tesla pay trucking companies to get 300,000 cars transported from their factories out to customers? And would it make sense for Tesla to become their own trucking company and become one of their own biggest customers? Because when Texas is ramped up and Fremont is ramped up, and we have 1.8 million vehicles produced at Texas and Fremont factories, it's going to be a lot of transportation Tesla has to do to get all these cars out in the countries. A lot of trucks, because what can they carry? Like 10 at a time? So if they suddenly can do all this trucking by themselves there, and they can get the trucks even cheaper than they have to sell them for, so there's going to be a lot of saving there, I think.
They carry 8 cars at a time, and yes, they have their own trucking company, and they are using, in a very limited way, they are using the semi to carry them. So one assumes they're going to be using more semis, but I will tell you that from Austin, most of the transport is done by rail. So
okay.
It's rail to local, and then as it is in Berlin, yeah.
Okay, then we maybe have to wait for the convoy that could beat rail.
So to ballpark it, you'd consider like how much is not going on rail, what's your daily deliveries. I know in China, you always see the videos of them driving the vehicles to the ports. But if you were shipping them on on car carriers, then it's like, what percent of your daily supply is going there? If you're reusing the carrier every day, and then dividing by 8. So if it was 40,000 cars per day, but half of them are going by truck carrier, then 20,000 divided by 8 would be about 1,500 might be that. But then you multiply that by how many parts that you're getting moving around between warehouses or suppliers and other things. If you're the one doing the delivery instead of others, then I could see Tesla needing, at the current scale, a fleet of 3,000, 4,000 trucks once they go fully that way, and then up to as you scale up, if you go to 10 times as many to 20 million cars, then you're looking at another 10x of that, so 30, 40,000 trucks just for their own purposes, if they don't get into some other business involving logistics, which they could.
Yeah.
And then also you're moving the megapacks around. So, but then you want to deliver by rail, but then megapacks are literally one truck cargo. So every one of those you're going to be moving. So, and then also power walls. So then there's also deliveries and stuff there. And then any supplying you're doing for and the other Elon Musk companies.
Yeah, and when the trains actually come into station, you still have to get them to the dealers, or their shops or whatever. So every car eventually goes on the truck, right?
Right. Yeah. So Tesla can get to significant scale in terms of needing a few thousand trucks and being its own major customer.
Yeah. Okay. So exciting.
But yeah, the logistics for making out the supercharger network, not just one using Megapack, but other stuff. It seems like the logistics of that, when they're making a few thousand every quarter, that's, I think, a pretty big demand on logistical supply. Yeah,
but also I think it's a good move for Tesla to make one customer at a time, and then scale up with them and build the charging network out for their customers, so they don't have to build out the whole charging net for the US, because they don't know where their trucks is going. Because now they know exactly where they're going. With Pepsi, they can just build out their charging network and then take the next customer and build out their charging network and so on.
But they can anticipate a bit, because they can see, okay, here's my pre-orders, here's where they're going to be, and then they can
of course,
they can say, okay, I'll need some charging here and there, and they'll have the lease agreements to know how they want the suppliers want it built out, whether they want their own charger or they want Tesla to make it, and then they can forecast where they expect more orders from, and also same thing for Cybertrucks. So they'll be integrated into their supercharger build out, where you go to have integrated lower grade supercharger 3, supercharger 2, with supercharger 4 to say, okay, which ones go bigger, which can go truck stop big. So it'll be in that mix that they can that they'll be able to plan out to and have a vision for how they want to, if I only get these orders, if I have this mega charger or truck stop, then they could build that into the plan.
Guys, I'm gonna peel off. I'm excited to have so many in the audience today, and buy the book. Okay. No, sorry. I cannot help myself. I'm always closing. So, but we'll see you all later.
Does anyone else have other questions or other topics? We can adjourn, but
this is David. I'm mostly just a listener and a follower, but I did have one point that the Megapack, the number of Megapacks is probably similar to the number of chargers that you have per vehicle. If you have semis that has one owner who goes one trip a day and then can charge at night, you can probably have about 20 Megapacks. But if you have, either, FSD or, multiple people using the same truck, so you're trying to get it to go, as close to 24/7 as possible, you're probably going to have to go to 4 or 5. That would be my guess.
Yeah, we need to have estimates of how much it will be, because we don't know yet. Something that hopefully we can maybe ask on a future earnings call would be, can they give us some hint as to what the actual ratios might be on that?
Yeah. Because you can, if you can charge a semi over, say, 4 hours, you can have 20, 30 hooked up through the same Megapack to just balance the grid. Because I did spend a lot of time working in, as a major industrial customer of electricity. And the main thing they cared about was, was your peak usage and also their own peak usage. So as long as you're not taking it, when they have a shortage, and, you can keep your amount of energy that you're taking from the grid pretty constant, that's what they really like. Yeah. When we were, the biggest industrial customer in Utah, half of our electricity cost, from the utility was the 15 minutes that we used the most power during the month. And the other half was everything else.
That's a very good point.
So that's where you get it. And it's probably pretty similar, but I think there's a lot of places, like California, where, they also care about how much they're producing.
Yeah, the economics then would be that if you have the wholesale price down at 7-10 cents, but then preventing those 35 cents per kilowatt hour, $1, $2 times where you've used too much, that's be a huge point. One of the commenters, in the comment area, noted the semi was not supposed to happen and gave the Bill Gates 2020 quote where he said that the 18-wheelers could not happen. That expanding the envelope of what is truly possible with electrification is something that's huge. But, a very good point there from someone with experience about utilities and the cost aspect and why semi can really drive Megapack to huge levels.
Yeah, and if you could get onto things like, the large industrial Schedule 9 rates, the rates for those, at least here in Utah, you're talking, 6 cents, it was 6 cents a kilowatt hour 5-10 years ago. It's super cheap. And 3 of that was demand pricing. So you can get with good load balancing, you can get down to 4 or 5 cents, probably quite a bit more now, but not, not that much more.
And if you have Megapacks, if you have a factory where you're moving stuff around, you may already have electrical things. So then you're helping your overall, just like me having power walls on my house and solar on top. I can then make sure I never have any tiered pricing. I'm always the lowest tier, and I can also sell power back to the utility when they had their, with the virtual power plant. So on the larger scale, all the companies that are early adopters on this become move up into a moderately scaled personal utility at the 10 megawatt. Or if people think that's about it, then I'll be posting. I've recorded this on a Zoom as well, so I'll be adding some just standard pictures to it, but people can listen to it, and then this will be of course saved as a recording on Twitter Space. Me or Dr. Noel, Best in Tesla, or Randy, or anyone else on Twitter. My website, Next Big Future, I have some videos on these topics, also on YouTube. And of course, Dr. Noel is on YouTube. Best in Tesla has his YouTube channel as well. So lots of ways to keep engaged on this. I can leave for a minute here to see if there's going to be any other questions or raised hands. And if anyone wants to speak about something, any other co-host or other speaker. Yeah, so my final point is that in general, I think that the fact this semi could enable the larger Tesla energy scaling is something that's I think very exciting, and a critical part of I think a master plan they have is going to be semi and the Tesla energy, and the fact that they enable more products like a 1,000-volt Cybertruck and something else, other super beast vehicles, is something that we'll have to explore in more detail for one of our follow-up discussions. If it's not it, then I will end this talk, and we will talk to you all next time. Thank you very much for attending. Oh, sorry, before I go, Dr. Know-it-all, you had your hand up.
Oh no, I was waving to say goodbye.
Oh, waving goodbye. Okay.